The room was dark, lit only by the candles on the tables and the fire in the fireplace. It was big enough to enclose several long tables and have its windowless walls surround the shadow, but small enough for one to be aware of the enclosure of its boundaries. The floor was carpeted, thickly enough to be once fluffy, but long since worn out. The only one wall was partially visible, the one with the fireplace. There were 5 tables in the room, of various lengths and shapes. 4 of them were rectangular, and one was small and round. They had different heights and styles, as though they had been gathered around together from wherever the source they could be found. They were in rows, sort of, lined up so as to be easily walked around between and around, but also just a little askew and out of place. The tables were laden with various equipment, though for what would have been unclear to most anyone who saw them. Some of them resembled chemistry, beakers and burners and other such scientific knickknacks. But there were also clumps of wool, lengths of ribbon and string, pieces of identifiable wood, leaves and flowers, precious gems, glass containers swirling with colorful energy. Across 2 of the tables, a sort of chain was set up, like a scientific experiment with a Rube Goldberg machine. The round tables served as a supply station where materials were kept. The other 2 held smaller, individual experiment stations, and had a little organization to speak of, if indeed there was anyone to speak at all. In fact, there was someone. A young unicorn. Fairly pretty, but with worried lines etched across her forehead. The colors of her coat and mane were muted and distorted in the orange glow of firelight, but in the sun they have shone distinctly. A pale blue coat, accented by a soft purple mane streaked with reddish gold. Here, in this dream, her cutie mark was distorted and shadowed, so could not be made out. For it was a dream. The unicorn asked Princess Luna to put her in an enchantment state of lucid dreaming, so that she could construct this place and conduct her experience undisturbed. She would sleep until she had found what she was looking for, experimenting with wild guess after hypothesis after theory until she found the answer. She had arrived in the dream plane and constructed the room exactly as she'd imagined an original idea, and willed into being all the ingredients she could possibly need. The one thing the unicorn could not dream up, in its pure form, was the solution, because she didn't know it yet, and that's why she was here, to find out. The unicorn walked over to one of the tables, continuing her work. She tilted a beaker of clear liquid into a pan of drizzling powder, and then she used her magic to grab a few flower petals and place them to precise locations on top of a bubbling mixture. Hurrying around to another part of the setup, she carefully levitated a small, polished, perfectly round blue stone with a hole through the center of the bottom of the still, cool water. She went on for some time this way. Time that could have been hours, days, or merely seconds. Always working, in complete silence, mind busily at work within the dream. Very little that she did seem to be connected in any way. Each little combination reaction state contained itself. Finally, she began to combine the various mixtures. A powder was poured into a carefully enchanted goblet, which sent out a spark of energy into a sparkling coil above it. The energy traveled down the coil, igniting a pile of delicately balanced moonflowers petals in front of bark. The smoke from that drifted into a funnel, leading to a magically suspended bubble of lavender water, stirred with a Roman wind. A few drops of now smoky water trickled down a half-pipe made of pure copper, into a sapphire vial filled with strange mixtures of swirling energies, and on it went. Down the long trail of strange substances, until it finally reached the end. The last drops of copper-colored liquid ran to a pan of frosty powder. There was a flash, and the pan was now emerald. Colored glass beaker filled with an icy substance that looked like water, except that water didn't usually give off a smoke. The unicorn, who had been watching the whole thing intently, drew in a breath. She was so close to her goal. If this worked, she didn't dare finish that thought. If She got her hopes up for nothing. This could crush her, of course, but she had done it so many times now, it might not affect her anymore. She couldn't count how long she'd been here, how many years or days or weeks it had been since she entered the dream. There was no way of telling time, with no sun or moon or stars to gauge the days in its small, enclosed world. She could easily daydream herself a bigger place with the sky, but she didn't want to. It felt safer in her small, candlelit room, where she could feel the borders of existence. Nothing needed to be beyond these shadowed walls that had been built up around herself. The unicorn shook herself out of her thoughts. It was time to see if her labor had paid off. Carefully, she lifted the emerald beaker. She walked over to the wall beside the fireplace, where a mirror stood. It was a simple full-length mirror, oval in shape, framed in gold. The frame had runes etched to it, runes that had painstakingly carved into soft metal herself. The unicorn reached out her magic to a feather on the supply table, gently controlling its path on its way over to her so that nothing would brush against and single carve out of place. It had to be perfect, or the spell might not work. She took a deep, steadying breath. The unicorn focused even harder on the feather, ever so carefully lifting the tip of its quill into the beaker that she also levitated. She dabbed it in the liquid as she would load a quill pen in ink to write, as that essentially what she was doing. Once it seemed to be appropriately soaked, she drew it out. Gently, she made the quill drift over to the very rune in the mirror's frame. Then, painstakingly, she followed the path she had already carved in the frame, rewriting each rune in its substance. The words were no language known to be pony kind. They were written in the language of dreams and spirits. As each symbol was retraced, it glowed golden with light of its own, increasing the light level of the room imperceptibly. Finally, she finished. Each symbol was aglow, perfectly traced. The unicorn put down the feather on the table behind her and refocused on the beaker that she still held in her magical grip. This she moved with slightly less care, tilting it to a steady stream of liquid pour as she traced it circle around the base of the mirror. When it was empty, the unicorn put it too on the table behind her. She took another deep breath, stilling herself. Here came an important part. She stared at the mirror, at the floor for minutes, seconds, hours. It was impossible to tell. After an eternity, she decided that she had to do it eventually, or risk waiting here forever. Without looking up, she said the magic words that would activate the spell. The words that are her question, her reason for being here. Who am I? She looked into the mirror and saw only herself. Stardust's dusklight sighed, and turned back to her experiment. The dream would go on until she found a solution.